good. So tell me what's going on for you. How could I help?
Right now, I'm in the process of doing untimed sections, and I feel like I've been doing it for the past 3 weeks. I've been mostly focusing on LG and LR, and now the problem is that I'm having is moving on from untimed to timed, or even moving on from untimed time to practice test. I don't know when to kind of make that jump, and I plan on taking the test on November, so I still have a few months to, to really get myself into that the timed and full length test, and I just don't know when to take that approach or take that next step.
Yeah, you've got a lot of time. We're speaking now mid-July, so you've got just about 4 months until the November LSAT. And you're right to be thinking about deliberately choosing when to move on. A lot of people just jump straight into practice exams, straight into time sections, but you got to build the foundation first. So I would ask you, do you feel proficient in the basics? Do you have a strong foundation in each section and each question type?
No. Untimed, I'm getting for LR, I'm getting -6. I've been averaging on the past 4 sections and -8 on the logical games.
Then it's not time to move on yet. You still have things to learn in the foundation. So you want to learn the theory, then apply doing individual questions by type when you notice a particular weak area. And only once you feel good about that, then do you move on.
So what do you suggest, like moving on when I'm like -2 on each untimed section, or like is there like a certain accuracy level that I should be scoring on each untimed?
I'm not going to give a specific number on this because it's really about where you want to be, what your goals are. And there's always trade-offs, right? Like if you're a month before the exam and you still don't feel great about where you're at, but you've got to take that particular test date, then you've got to move on to timing no matter what. But then I would also challenge the underlying assumption that you really had to do November, because even if you did January, you could still apply that cycle and be fine.
Okay. So my next kind of question that comes with that is, when doing untimed, I usually just review the ones I got wrong, like thoroughly. Like I look at so I have a notebook, a wrong answer notebook, that I write down where my reasoning went wrong, and then I move on and answer or review each answer choice. But I don't know if I should be doing that with the ones I got correct, since it's untimed. So my guess, my train of thought is, since I did it untimed, like my reasoning was fine versus if I was doing it untimed. But I guess sometimes I may answer, since I haven't been reviewing the ones I got correct, I'm like, what if I actually got that correct, not because my reasoning was correct, but because I just kind of got lucky on it.
That is a very intelligent way to think about it. I agree that it's worth not only reviewing the ones you get wrong, but also the ones that give you difficulty, even if you got it right, or you guessed on it and got it right, or you could have done it more efficiently, even if you still got it right technically. Because the LSAT being so strictly timed, it's not enough to get it right. You got to get it right efficiently. And lucky guesses could have just as easily gone the other way. And so I recommend what I call the Socratic review method. You can look this up on my YouTube channel. And the idea is that regardless of whether you get it right or not, you still have to go through that same review process. And keeping a wrong answer journal is a great way to go about it.
So would you suggest, like in the early stages, to review each question that I've taken untimed?
Not necessarily every single question you do, because that quickly becomes overwhelming. That's a lot of questions, most likely.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend two things. One is do fewer questions and review them in more depth, but still, you don't have to review every single one. If you got it right, you feel good about it, and you solved it efficiently, no need to spend more time there. Instead, focus on where you really need the attention, which is anything you could have done better.
Okay. Like I mentioned, like I've been doing one LR passage and one LG passage within the week, then reviewing it in that week. But I don't know if I should be also doing like problem sets, because I guess something that noticed, at least in the past trends, is that I've been getting a lot of the flaw questions wrong. And even though I review them thoroughly untimed, sometimes I don't review question type, like problem set, like a set of 10 of flaws. Like, I don't know if I should be doing problem sets in between before I take another untimed section, or should I just be reviewing thoroughly the flaw questions that I get wrong?
Yes to both. It's all good. So there are some cases where doing untimed questions by type is good. There are other cases where going through an entire section is good. If you want to drill flaw questions, then yeah, do several flaw questions by type. If you want to mix it up, then mix it up with a full section. That's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I have another question regarding like flaw questions. So something that I've noticed, at least from some of them, is that at least in my train of thought, you may have a different response to this, but sometimes a flaw question, from what I see it, may have other like minor flaws, but it's not the main flaw in the argument. And I don't know if that's just me noticing that, or if it's kind of something that LSAT writers do and have like minor flaws, but it's not the big flaw in the argument.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I wouldn't say that the minor flaws are necessarily deliberate. I would say it's more simply because arguments contain gaps.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to make any claim because there are lots of underlying assumptions. But as you said, there is one big glaring flaw, and that's what you want to focus on. What is the most egregious error the argument is guilty of making? And as we said, drilling flaw questions by type will help you recognize that. So it's certainly worth doing. And you'll notice that some flaws are classic logical fallacies. Others are simply failing to consider something major. So not every flaw can be categorized as ad hominem personal attack or correlation causation or confusing necessary sufficient. Those all come up, but some of them will just be unique to that particular situation.
Okay. And something that I've also been struggling with is like necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, kind of like when I see a necessary assumption, like I see like, okay, if the conclusion is true, then what must be true if the conclusion is true? So something that bridges the gap between like, I guess, the premise to the conclusion. But then when it comes to sufficient assumption, it's like, what validates this conclusion that is drawn? And sometimes I'm like, sometimes I get confused on understanding. They seem similar to me. They seem really similar to me. Like, I don't know if you could explain it better. Like, I don't know. They just seem really similar to me, because in the end, I feel like they're protecting the argument from not falling apart. But I don't know. I don't know if you could explain it to me a little better.
Yeah, this is a common problem area, and I'm not going to go into all of it because I've done this several times before on the YouTube channel, but I will say that it's important to come at them from completely different perspectives, completely different approaches. They are both assumptions. They do both relate to gaps in the argument, but I would think of sufficient assumption as bridging the gap 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. Necessary assumption does not necessarily close it all the way, but it's simply something that's required in order for the argument to work. And it's in the very name. Necessary assumption is required. Sufficient assumption is enough to guarantee it all the way.
Okay. That's, yeah. Okay. That makes it a little bit more clear. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And I have one more final question, and this is because I've been saving up some money from my summer jobs and all, and I really wanted to do well on this test because I see this as an investment, like in the long run. And I was wondering how do I go from, like, how many times, if I hire a tutor, how many times is it recommended to meet with that tutor? Because I don't know any of my friends who have tutors, but I wanted to try to get a tutor, but I don't know how many times should I meet with that tutor. Once a week, twice a week, or even once or twice a month. I don't know where to go from that.
It's not about the number of times. It's about the insights that you get from those sessions. So if you just want a tutor who's going to walk through problems with you, you could have lists of every single problem that gives you trouble and every single one you got wrong, every single one that you could have solved more efficiently. And you could spend 10 hours a week working with somebody to go through all the problems with you. Or you could have someone who you bring your toughest problems to you and you go through those in depth. Then you take the insights you gain from those to study more effectively on your own. Like for me personally, I coach, I don't tutor. And so I'm not looking to cover every single LSAT problem under the sun with a student. I ask my students to send me the 3 to 5 hardest problems they've recently encountered. And we go through those in depth. We might meet once a week. We might meet twice a month. We might meet 3 times a month. It's not about that. That's somewhat arbitrary even. And that's based on the test date. If your test date's a month away, you might meet more frequently. If it's 4 months away, as in your case, maybe a little bit less frequently. But I'd be thinking more about what do you want to get out of it and come to the sessions incredibly prepared to get a lot out of it. And if you do, you may not need as much live time with the expert.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. That's really all the questions I came in with that I was, I guess, kind of having trouble answering.
Of course. Yeah, sure. And you can call me Steve, by the way, but I'm glad I was able to help. Before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
The biggest one was definitely the necessary and sufficient assumption. Sufficient assumption is about, 100%, and the necessary assumption is kind of like closing that gap, but not all the way.
Nice. Awesome, man. We'll keep in touch. Let me know if you need anything moving forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.